Hey everybody. This is Joe Jaggard. Um, the project I worked on this semester was the UH Retama uh, Community Hospital in Selma, Texas. It was the budget was $563 million, partially publicly funded, but the owner is University Health. Um, uh, Mainly on this job, what I've been doing um, is I was basically just a project engineer. Um, the beginning of the project, one of the things I learned um, was, well, I had to go label the columns with the datum lines, and so I went down into the crawl space and labeled. I had some helpers, but I helped label all these columns with the grids of the datum lines on the drawings, so that people would know where they're at or what area they're at. Um, the project was broken up into like areas A, B, C, D, G, and stuff like that. Um, and that was one of the things I helped out with. I helped the superintendent with. Um, but other than that, I've written a ton of RFIs. I think I've written around like 50 RFIs at this point. I don't know. Some people write a lot more, but uh, I wrote RFIs for our steel subcontractors, our concrete subcontractors, um, the glazing subcontractor, um, anything to do with caulking or expansion joints, um, or sealants, um, anything to do with the mock-up, um, a lot of this stuff, anything to do with like the exterior, the weather barriers, brick, masonry, any of that stuff. Um, Mainly though, steel. I've written a lot of steel RFIs, um, because we just got a ton. Concrete submittals too. I done a lot. I've sent a lot of samples to the architects. Um, and I think one of the things that I skills that I've learned is I learned a lot about the procurement and how it ties into the schedule. This isn't just a regular schedule on this project. Um, we started in the cup because we got to get to be able to do the floors. You got to have the whole place dried in. You have to have air conditioning running, and it's a hospital, so you need to start in the cup. And then you start on the first floor, work your way all around, and then you end up back on the first floor. Um, the first floor is like the biggest part of this hospital, and then two two levels 2 through 5 is just repeat. Um, but regarding some of the skills, I know it says right here that we have to talk about skills that we've learned. Um, since I've just spent so much time writing RFIs and like trying to dig into the drawings and learning about problems. Um, some of the things that I wish I could do a little bit better. I've learned how to just go and look at the drawings uh, and look at shop drawings. Sometimes you're not always going to find stuff in the drawings, and that's why we write RFIs because the architect sucks. They suck at doing drawings, so everybody's writing RFIs about missing sheets or uh, you know missing missing like beams or um, like calculations for uh, weights of lifts or boom lifts on the concrete or stuff like that. Um, so I guess a skill that just being able to look at the drawings, huge. You gotta be able to read plans. These drawings are huge, and the schedule is huge. You gotta understand the why behind what we're doing. What understanding the sequence, um, and the precursors and what goes before something or what goes after it. As it regards to RFIs, one of the things I've learned is uh being able to name RFIs in a way that you'll be able to remember it. I found that I'm always writing RFIs that I can't remember stuff when we're in meetings. Like, oh crud, I have to go and look it up. I'm like, I totally forgot I wrote this RFI, or I totally forgot that I forgot to submit this certain submittal to the design team. If I created it in the software, but they didn't get it. Um, Another thing is emails. Making sure you cover your ass. You always, whenever you're gonna send an email, you gotta make sure it's right. We make a lot of mistakes, and you gotta make sure that you look smart. You gotta know what you're doing, because then there's a lot of politics at play on this job. We had a competing job just south of us called Palo Alto. That's the job. If you look back a couple weeks, they had a, a shear wall collapse, so we're gonna beat them on schedule. But uh, anyways, it's just a lot of politics involved with the owner, and future projects that are, oh, this is a big project. Um, Another thing is communicating with subcontractors. You know what? One of the things, like, if you got a question, you just got to call them. Call them. Quit sending emails. They're not going to respond. They're playing games sometimes. This one guy, this last week, with our concrete, we needed shop drawings for the tank yard, and I haven't been able to get a hold of him for a month. And so I finally just called him, and he got mad at me because I called him out for not looking at the drawings. And um, we sent back an email, and he hasn't responded yet. So we got him. But just like a lot of things, like most of the stuff is administrative stuff, and I think knowing how to build, knowing the process of what comes before which. This last week I wrote, like, for some reason, like, the drawings showed a weather barrier underneath where an embed where a beam was being welded to an embed. Well, if we did that, then it would just burn through the weather barrier. Um, and so I wrote an RFI about that. If we could just wrap the weather barrier around it, over on top of the embed. No, it was actually a ledger angle that was being welded to it. But anyways, that's one of the things I've learned learned a lot about structure. Um, how to epoxy and dowel, how to epoxy and um, dowel, like Nelson studs. What a moment weld is, because there's a ton of those on this job. Um, like inserts and uh, duct straps are, um, sheathing. Two 5/8 inch gypsum boards constitutes a fire rated wall. Uh, I just learned a lot of different stuff about construction and in general, just how to build. That's ultimately what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn how to build a structure, because that's ultimately going to help me in the future once I get a job. I feel like these internships are going to help prepare me for the next job I'm on, and procurement, and just understanding um, the sequence of construction, um, how to place and organize things, and how you learn. The best way to learn, I feel like, is writing RFIs and getting out to the site and just looking at and watching the people do the work. The electricians, especially, I don't know, I feel like they just like to share a lot more. But um, I've gotten really good at writing RFIs and being confident in doing my research, doing my due diligence and doing my research, and then submitting an RFI, um, and helping back up our senior superintendents, and the project managers, and just helping them out. That's been huge, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity. So I hope everybody enjoys this. Thanks.